It's loading. And we've started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miles. I'm a research assistant here at the Law Commission, and welcome to today's presentation about the research assistant, or RA, role. There are going to be broadly 4 parts to today's presentation. First, we're going to talk to you a bit about the work that we do at the Law Commission. Second, we're going to discuss the research assistant role and give you a bit more information about what that entails. Thirdly, we're going to discuss the RA application process and give you some tips on making a good application. And finally, we're going to have a Q&A where we'll answer questions that you have about anything that we have discussed, or more importantly, anything that we've omitted about the aforementioned areas. A couple points of housekeeping first off. So this event is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to our website and our YouTube after the presentation. Microphones and cameras are switched off for all attendees, except for those who are presenting. That means that if you have a question, please post it to the Q&A section. You should be able to see that on your little bar up at the top. It will be reviewed by our team before it's published. And please, just so that we have time to review them, please make sure that you are posting them sort of throughout the presentation. Gives you a better chance of having your question answered. Given time constraints and the number of attendees we're expecting, we're not going to be able to answer every single question put to us. However, we will attempt to answer as many questions as possible that have not been addressed elsewhere in the presentation. There may be questions which, if somewhat more technical, perhaps about an element of the recruitment process, we may not be able to answer on the spot. But if for any reason you don't have your question answered and still feel the need to have it answered, feel free to email recruitment@lawcommission.gov.uk. That is recruitment@lawcommission.gov.uk. I'll remind you of that at the end of the presentation, and it'll be up on screen for you to screenshot, note down, whatever you see fit. Finally, please do not use the raise hand function in this meeting. It interferes with the recording, and it does not make it any more likely that your question will be answered. We will lower any hands that are raised. So, to start the presentation proper, I'd like to pass over to Joe, one of our co-CEOs, to give you some introductory remarks and to talk a little bit about the value of the work that we do here at the Law Commission and how the RAs feed into that. Off to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Miles. Hello, I am Jo Otterburn. I'm the Joint Chief Executive of the Law Commission, along with my job share partner, Stephanie Hack. The opportunity of being a research assistant here at the Law Commission is rich and rewarding at any stage in your legal career. It combines stimulating, purposeful work, experience of working within the public sector and closely with government departments and Parliament, and being part of a collegiate team of legal experts. And the work of the Law Commission is quite unique in the public sector, in that we work very closely with the government, but we are nonetheless independent. So as a research assistant, you would learn about the workings of officials and ministers, but it's also very externally focused because of the high degree of consultation and interaction with stakeholders across our projects. We currently have around 17 projects underway. It varies from sort of anywhere from about 16 to 20 at any given time. And we have just published our 14th programme, which you can see on our website, and that outlines sort of some of the upcoming projects that we'll be starting. But just to give you a flavour of some of the projects that we have going, there is homicide, product liability, automated decision making in the public sector, business tenancies, kinship care, burials and cremation and new funerary methods, agricultural law in Wales, and criminal appeals. So you can see it's a really broad span, and that's just sort of a range of examples. They have very real purpose and very real world impact to make our society better. So working on these projects, there is a real opportunity to develop your legal research, your analytical, communication and writing skills, which would be useful elsewhere in your career. And you also become part of a network. We have a very strong alumni group, but also as part of a cohort of research assistants who start at the same time, you really do build bonds and build your own network of colleagues. So finally, I just wanted to say something about the culture of our organisation. Our organisational values are around independence, integrity and expertise, and we do take those very seriously in bringing them to life in our work. But we also take great pride in the Law Commission being a place of shared learning, of collaboration and of inclusion. Today is an opportunity for you to hear more about the Law Commission and what it's like to be a research assistant and hearing directly from our staff. So I'm very delighted to be joined by a number of our current colleagues, including some of our current research assistants, our lawyers, and colleagues from other parts of the organisation, including HR. And you can hear the passion and pride with which they speak about their work. Thank you very much. Over to you, Bella.
Thank you very much, Jo. My name's Bella and I'm a first year research assistant in the criminal law team working on the Criminal Appeals Project. And today I'm going to step you through who we are, what we do and how we do it at the Law Commission. The Law Commission was created 60 years ago by the Law Commissions Act 1965, and its role is to conduct law reform to make sure that the law is fair, modern, simple and cost-effective. We are a non-departmental public body, as Jo discussed, which is a type of arm's length body. This means that we have a role in government processes, but are independent of government in the recommendations that we make, operating at an arm's length from ministers. Although we are independent, we are sponsored by the government. Our core funding comes from the Ministry of Justice. And before undertaking projects, we also have to secure agreement from government that it has a serious intention to take forward law reform in that area. Importantly, our jurisdiction includes both England and Wales. This means that we undertake work for and advise both the UK and Welsh governments on matters of law reform. We also work with the Welsh Advisory Committee, which is the body which advises the Welsh Government on law reform in Wales. Next, briefly on where we are. The headquarters of the MOJ and the Law Commission office are in Westminster, conveniently reached by a number of transport links and right next to St James Park, a lovely place for lunchtime walks. At the moment, we're expected to be in the office 2 days a week. Turning now to how the Law Commission is organised. The Law Commission is structured collaboratively across 4 teams, and within each of those teams there is a commissioner, lawyers, research assistants, and sometimes legal assistants. A role that where project need arises, some research assistants may have the opportunity to be promoted to, although this is not guaranteed. Outside of these teams, we have Parliamentary Counsel, who we work with for drafting our proposals in legislation, as well as HR and the Chief Executives who manage our relationships with other organisations. Turning now to how we select our projects. There are 2 ways that the Law Commission can receive projects. The first is via programs of law reform. And in developing each law reform program, the Commission undertakes a consultation to seek the public's views on the issues most in need of reform. For the 14th program, the Commission received around 500 submissions. And from the suggestions contained in those submissions, our commissioners chose topics for their new program. All of these topics have acknowledgement from the government that there is a serious intention to reform the law in the relevant area. The 14th program of law reform was launched in September of this year. The second source is a departmental reference, which involves an issue of particular interest to government. But regardless of the source of where these projects come from, importance, suitability, resources, and departmental support are always considered in making final decisions. Now I'll discuss the stages of a project at the Law Commission. There are 5 of them. The first is pre-consultation, or rather, the first is initiation, when we receive a project, either from one of those 2 sources that I just discussed. The second then is pre-consultation. This can involve publication of an issues paper to seek stakeholder views on what the project should cover. The next phase is consultation, which involves publication of a consultation paper seeking stakeholder views on provisional proposals in the form of questions. These views are analysed, and that analysis feeds into the 4th stage of a project, policy development. Once policy is finalised, that forms recommendations contained in our final report, which leads me to implementation. Once a final report is published, it is a decision for government to implement its recommendations. Given this, we're proud that 2/3 of our final reports are implemented in whole or in part by government. And because of that, the role of a research assistant is a unique one. Our work contributes to the law of England in Wales, which makes every day exciting. Turning now to the projects that are currently underway at the Law Commission, starting with the criminal team. The criminal law team has 6 projects assigned to it. The first of those projects is a review of the law governing criminal appeals in England and Wales, which is my project. That includes the tests and procedures used by the Court of Appeal and Crown Court of Appeal on appeal, but also the CCRC, retention of and access to evidence, and compensation and support for the wrongly convicted. This project is currently in the consultation, analysis, and policy development stage. The second project is a review of the law on contempt of court, which considers reform to improve its effectiveness, consistency, and coherence. And part 1 of this project's final report was published 2 weeks ago. The third project is a review of the law relating to homicide, including full and partial defences and the existing sentencing framework for murder. This project is in its pre-consultation stage. The fourth project is a review of the law of consent in the criminal law to provide greater predictability and to modernise the criminal law in England and Wales. This project is in the initiation stage to start next year. The fifth is a project to identify and describe unacceptable gaps in the law relating to offences against dead bodies and to propose new offences to fill those gaps if necessary. This project is also in the initiation stage. And finally, we have a project on insanity, again in the initiation phase. A project to consider when a person should not be criminally liable because of a mental condition at the time they committed an alleged offence. Moving now to the commercial and common law team projects. So this team has 4 projects assigned to it. The first is a review of the law governing cooperative and community benefit societies to ensure that it fits the nature and needs of those societies, as well as to ensure that regulation is proportionate and effective. This project is in the consultation, analysis, and policy development stage. The second project is a review of the way in which private international law operates in the context of electronic trade documents and digital assets. This project is again in the consultation, analysis, and policy development stage. The third project is a review of the Friendly Societies Acts to ensure that they fit the nature and needs of societies, that regulation is appropriate and predictably certain, and that the legislative framework facilitates and encourages sustainable growth. This project is also in the consultation, analysis, and policy development stage. The final project with this team is a review of the law relating to liability for defective products, and this project is in the pre-consultation phase. I'll now pass over to Georgina to discuss the property, family and trust law, as well as public law and the Law in Wales projects.
Thanks, Bella. Hi, everyone. I'm Georgina, and I'm a second-year research assistant in the Public Law and Law in Wales team. So as Bella said, I'll walk you through the 2 remaining teams on this slides. So first of all, we've got property, family and trust. So the first project there is business tenancies, the right to renew. Now, the legal framework governing business tenancies is over 70 years old. And while the Landlord and Tenant Act of 1954 has been updated in the past, it's now around 20 years since the last significant updates were made. So this project looks at whether we should reform the right to renew a commercial leasehold currently governed by that act. And this is in its consultation phase. Then we've got burial and cremation, and this looks at the problems that arise with the lack of access to burial ground and whether we can reopen and reuse existing burial grounds, depending on where those grounds are and who governs them. And often the acts are dated nearly 200 years ago. And although the Act governing cremation is slightly more modern, there are really big issues about collecting ashes and the environmental concerns around crematoriums. Now, this is a part of a wider project which includes the New Funerary Methods project, which sits within the Public Law and Law in Wales team, and I'll walk through that in a bit. And burial and cremation is gearing up for its report stage. Then we've got chancel repair liability. Now, this is an ancient obligation attached to land, which requires the owner of a land to repair their local parish church. This project is reviewing the process and effect of registering that liability against land, and they're also getting ready for their report. Then we've got management of housing estates, and this project will consider how residents could be given greater control over the management of their housing estates. It will examine whether that right to manage regime that benefits leaseholders in blocks of flats could be adapted to apply to housing estates. And this project is in its initiation phase. Ownerless land, which is also in its initiation phase, is all about land that passes to the Crown. There is uncertainty surrounding the Crown Estate's liability for ownerless land, the difficulties with managing ownerless land, and bringing that land back into profitable use. So this project will carry out a review of the law, and it will consider whether some types of ownerless land should pass to a body other than the Crown. Then we've got kinship care. And kinship care is often an alternative to the child entering the care system, or a way of caring for a child who is the subject of a care order. The project will consider the scope for reform to simplify and streamline the orders underpinning kinship care placements and how to better support consideration of kinship care. And this project is in its pre-consultation phase. And then we've got finally commercial leasehold, and this comprises two sub-projects. The first will review the Landlord and Tenant Covenants Act of 1995 and rights of first refusal under the Landlord and Tenant Act of 1987. We've heard that two aspects of the law are causing significant problems in practice for commercial leasehold transactions, and this is in its initiation phase. Moving on then to the Public Law and Law in Wales team, we've got their autonomy in aviation. And recent breakthroughs have seen the development of new, innovative, autonomous and highly automated systems and vehicles. This includes drones as well as advanced air mobility vehicles. The project reviews existing legislation to identify any legislative blocks, gaps or uncertainties, and the proposals of law reform will ensure that the UK is ready to take advantage of those oncoming advances. The Law Commission's report will be published in 2026. And then we've got compulsory purchase. Compulsory purchase is a legal mechanism by which certain bodies can acquire land without the consent of the owner. We've been asked to review the law on compulsory purchase, procedure and compensation. Some of this law dates back to 1845, and we'll be producing a draft bill that consolidates and makes technical changes to the law of compulsory purchase. Now, the draft bill alongside the report is due to be published in 2027. Agricultural law in Wales. So this is my project. The law which governs the agricultural sector in Wales is spread across a patchwork of legislation. This makes it really difficult to access the law and in places hard to understand. And the Welsh Government has committed to organising the legislation applicable in Wales into codes of law. And we've been asked to scope whether and how agricultural law in Wales could be modernised, simplified and made more accessible through a process of codification. And we'll be publishing that scoping report in 2026. The last project then is the new funerary methods project. So as you heard earlier, burial and cremation are currently in use as funeral methods in England and Wales, but companies are also developing new funerary methods such as alkaline hydrolysis and human composting. In England and Wales, these new funerary methods are currently unregulated, other than laws which apply more generally, such as environmental and planning law. So this project looks at what an appropriate regulatory framework might look like, factoring in concerns like human dignity, environmental and public health concerns. A bill will be accompanied with the report, and that is due to be published also in 2026. Thank you. So moving on then to the next slide about research assistants. So each year we recruit up to 18 research assistants in total. Successful applicants who apply in January 2026 will start in September 2026. Research assistant contracts will be offered for just under 2 years by default, with an option for applicants to select a 52-week contract instead if preferred. You'll apply to one of the 4 teams previously mentioned. You cannot apply to more than one, but you do not, however, apply to a specific project. If you're successful, that is something that's determined later on in the process. There can also be an opportunity to extend your contract, as Bella mentioned earlier, but this depends on if the project you are assigned to requires it. Thank you. So then the role about what does a research assistant do? Well, the role varies at each stage of the project. It also might differ depending on what team you're in. So what I'll try and do is walk you through a brief overview of each stage. So at the pre-consultation stage, this involves a lot of desk-based research. You might be looking into legislation, cases, and articles. You might undertake some comparative research, especially looking at Canada and Australia, who are also common law jurisdictions. And the point here is to try and understand the current law and identify any issues that require attention. You might undertake some pre-consultation engagement, and that means meeting with a range of stakeholders to ensure that you're receiving and becoming aware of the full range of issues. And as a research assistant, you might be involved in liaising with those stakeholders, arranging the meetings, and taking a minute. You'll start to develop some policy and think about some provisional proposals or questions that might end up in the consultation paper. And so you might be involved in some drafting and pulling together some policy notes. At the consultation phase then, this happens once a consultation paper is published and the project moves into its consultation stage. This involves many more meetings with stakeholders to try and gain their feedback on the provisional proposals for reform. Research assistants will help organise those meetings, and you'll take a minute so that we have a record of all the feedback that we receive. Stakeholders will also submit written responses to the consultation paper, and in that they'll have their views on the questions and provisional proposals. As a research assistant, you're likely to work on an analysis of these consultation responses, and that involves reading through all of the responses to a consultation question or chapter and identifying key themes, points, and questions that arise from those responses. This analysis is then used for policy development to determine whether we should recommend what we provisionally proposed. If there are any additional points or new issues that come up in consultation, there may be further research that a research assistant conducts at this stage, and you might be involved in writing up policy notes from this analysis or attend and discuss issues at policy meetings with the lawyers and the commissioner. The last stage then is the report stage, and once your team has decided on recommendations for reform, a research assistant will again help prepare the final report for peer review, which is an internal process. This is accompanied by a draft bill. A research assistant might help with drafting instructions to Parliamentary Council. So as you can see, a day in the life of a research assistant will vary depending on the stage of a project, but it can usually involve a mixture of meetings, independent research or writing, and working with other members of the project team. So thank you, and slide next. Can we move? Oh, thank you. So why become a research assistant? So there's several reasons as to why you might want to become a research assistant. The first is the cutting edge legal research. So you're carrying out really intellectually stimulating work, and your input really counts. You're making the law future-proof. You're always staying alert to new issues which may require new laws. So take aviation and autonomy, for example. And you're producing reports that academics will refer to, and often you're undertaking research in an area which has not previously been explored. So, for example, with the Agricultural Law in Wales project, I've often dealt with sub-areas of the law with little to no textbook treatment. Now, that's been really difficult from a research perspective, but it's also meant that the work that we're producing as part of the project offers a new approach in that area. You also get an insider's view of government and lawmaking. So you work closely with stakeholders who have that frontline experience, and you get to interact with a real breadth of people. I've interacted with Welsh Government, Office of the Legislative Council, as well as Parliamentary Council. And you get to really understand more about how government works and that interaction between politics and lawmaking. There are also benefits to civil service employment, so it's a 37 work week, and you also get something called flexi time, and there are really good learning and development and volunteering opportunities. The colleagues are also a really good bonus, so you're surrounded by very talented colleagues who have a huge range and breadth of experience, and that allows you to add new perspectives to your work. The Law Commission is small enough so that you can know everybody, and we often arrange social events after work, and there's opportunities to join committees such as the Mental Health Allies, the Social and Outreach Committees. And then the last point there, which is career development. So the research assistant role is often regarded as a stepping stone in your career. The Law Commission is held in high regard among legal professionals, so it's a real excellent addition to applications. And you're surrounded by barristers, solicitors, academics, and a Court of Appeal judge. So it's a real opportunity to network. And there are also sometimes opportunities for career developments within the Law Commission, as Bella earlier mentioned, the legal assistant role. So thank you. And so we've now got information about the application process itself. So we'll be publishing our guide for applicants on our website in December. And this document will provide detailed information about each stage of the process to help you prepare. The academic requirements for the role are 2 years of legal studies by the time you're due to start the role, so that's September 2026, and a first class or high 2-1 degree with elements of first class work. So this means you should be on track to graduate and achieve your degree by September 2026 if you haven't already, because that's when most research assistants typically join us. 2 years of legal studies can be fulfilled either through an undergraduate degree or through 2 years of postgraduate studies. Now, there's no requirement that you've undertaken your law degree in the UK. Candidates who have studied outside of the UK and meet the academic requirements may also apply. You must be able to demonstrate that you have a comprehensive understanding of the legal system, of the England and Wales legal system, and that you have a keen interest in the areas of law overseen by the team for which you've applied. Brilliant, thank you. Next slide. So just a bit more information on the application process. So the first step is an online application where you'll complete the success profile questions. Do give yourself plenty of time to carefully review and complete the application. There will then be a SIF, and if you're sifted, there'll be a written test which is sent to you by the email that you used to apply. So that means make sure you check your junk or your spam email, and this written test must be completed within a specified time frame. There is then an interview with your chosen team, and this can last up to 45 minutes. And again, the interview will be assessed against the success profiles, and it might require some reading beforehand, but that's dependent on the team. Thank you. And then on to Welsh speakers. So if you are a Welsh speaker, please note this in the application form. The Law Commission represents both England and Wales, so we are really keen to encourage applications from Welsh speakers. It's an important skill for any of the 4 teams, not just the Public Law and Law and Wales team. The Welsh language skills help to support Welsh publications, Welsh-specific projects, Welsh aspects of England and Wales projects, but also maintaining relationships with our stakeholders in Wales. And whilst these language skills are important for the Commission's work, it provides you as a Welsh speaker invaluable experiences as a research assistant. So as a Welsh speaker myself, working at the Law Commission has given me really unique opportunities, such as attending conferences and engaging with leading practitioners and judges in the Welsh legal sphere. So if you do have any proficiency, please note that in the form and note to what level, and whether that's written, oral, or both. Thank you. And then on the Disability Confident Scheme. So the Ministry of Justice is a disability confident employer, which means that we aim to offer interviews for candidates with a disability and who pass our minimum criteria. This criteria is to be considered for an interview under the scheme is that you have a physical or mental impairment or a long-term health condition which has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on your ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities, and to have demonstrated in your application and testing stages that you meet the minimum job criteria as set out in the advert. You'll not be asked for any detail about your disability, but you can let us know if you need any reasonable adjustments through the recruitment process. At application stage, you'll have a link to the Ministry of Justice recruitment, and we also have the Law Commission recruitment email, which you are welcome to reach out to. The only thing to note is that the jobs portal is not set up or governed by the Law Commission, HR, so the Ministry of Justice recruitment team at the application stage might be your best first point of contact. If you also need any reasonable adjustments, and that includes for anyone who has a disability or any neurodivergence, please do let us know at any point in the process by emailing our recruitment mailbox, which Miles pointed out at the start of the meeting. And now I will pass on to Rosie.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm the senior lawyer in the criminal law team, and I'm currently leading the homicide project. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the application process and some tips for success. So start with the online application form then. So the civil service use recruitment principles that are called the success profiles. There's lots of information about them online, and it's essentially a way of identifying key behaviours, experience and skills for the role and finding the right ways of testing them during the application process. For the RA application process, we test the relevant skills, the behaviours and experiences with a CV and some specific questions where you'll be asked examples of certain behaviours or experiences. So on the slide there, that is what's going to be tested at application stage. You'll note that for communicating and influencing, that is one of the behaviours that we test. We test that both with a specific question, so there'll be some space on the application form for you to give some information, particularly around your communication and influencing skills, but also you'll be assessed on the way that you communicate throughout your application form as well. For the CV section, which will be part of the application form, please do read the guide for applicants, which will be made available online. Really carefully about this. The CV section of the online application form is where you can tell us how you meet that minimum academic qualification criteria that Georgina explained earlier. The guide goes into a lot of detail and step by step, it gives you examples of how to include the relevant detail that we need. If you don't give us the level of detail that we've requested, unfortunately, your application won't be successful. So it's really important that you do take a look at that. It's quite simple and straightforward to follow. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to email. On the application form in the CV section, that's also where you can put some information about being a Welsh speaker, as Georgina mentioned as well. There'll be space there for you to explain what your qualifications are as a Welsh speaker. The minimum criteria that was mentioned for the Disability Confidence Scheme is that you meet the academic qualifications set out, along with meeting a minimum score for each of those 4 areas that are going to be assessed on the application form. Next slide, please. So this is just some tips for filling in the form. There is lots of information online about civil service success profiles and how to complete application forms and respond to questions under the success profile framework. And there'll also be a lot of information on guide for applicants as well. So that there should be quite a lot of help out there. But just a little bit of sort of research assistant specific guidance then. Really, this is just to say that there's lots of different ways to demonstrate your skills or experience. You don't need to have been in a research assistant role previously. It doesn't even need to have been legal previous experience, but it is important to show in your answer how whatever experience it is that you do have and want to talk about, how that is relevant to the research assistant role at the Law Commission. And by making it really relevant in your answer, it shows that you understand the role and that you really understand what skills we need and that you have the skills that would be useful for us here. So the example on the slide there is of a shop assistant working in a shop. It can be a relevant example of lots of different skills that are useful in the research assistant role. So, for example, it could be a good example of team working. Are you able to show how you worked effectively with people who had different styles? It could be an example of communication. Have you had to explain a store policy to a difficult customer? It could be an example of working under pressure to timelines. Have you had to deliver some really good work in a really busy period? How is it you manage that? And what skills did you utilise that you think would be relevant at the Law Commission as well? The next slide then is about the application form, and it's generally considered that the best way to answer civil service questions is to use what's called the STAR method, and that is where you set out situation, task, action and result in your answer. So again, there's an example on the slide there, and many more online as well if you want to have a look. Even within this structure, there are things that you can do really well to stand out. The first thing I'd say is ensure that you focus on your role. What is it that you did in that example? What was the situation? What was your task? What were your actions? And what was the result of your involvement or contribution to that result? It's obviously really great to show teamwork, but we aren't looking to hire your colleagues or your sort of classmates. We want to know what you can bring. So make it really specific to what your role has been. You can also use the result to make it relevant to Law Commission works. You can align the example or the results with the type of work or outcomes that are expected here at the Law Commission. So for the example on the slide there about sort of wider team adoption and task completion, that's things that we really look for in research assistants here. The next slide then is on the written test. If you're invited for interview, you will be emailed a written test to complete remotely. You'll be sent all the instructions by email along with the timeframes for completing it. And you'll be sent some material on which the written test will be based. So, for example, it might be that you're sent some pieces of legislation and you'll be asked questions about it to submit a written answer on. And the questions are really aimed at your understanding and interpretation of the law. It's about thinking, how do you approach new or unfamiliar or complex bits of law? You will be sent all the material that you need. We don't usually require you to have any prior knowledge of the area of law that or the area that the written test is based on, and we don't usually require you to do any further research. You'll be sent everything that you need to answer the question. Sometimes the written test is aimed at the work that you might do as a research assistant, and it's useful to think about the kind of skills that we look for in a research assistant when completing the written test. So, for example, you might be asked, how would you explain a complex area of law to a lay reader, for example? Your communication skills will also be tested on the written test. Usually you will have 6 hours to complete it, but that will be confirmed in the instructions that are sent to you. But do let us know if you have any reasonable adjustments that mean that you need longer to complete a written test. Okay, moving to the interview then. So the interviews are usually about 30 to 45 minutes long. They are with a panel of lawyers and usually someone outside the team as well that you've applied to. So everyone on the panel will be introduced and you'll have an explanation of how the interview is going to run. And there'll be an opportunity at the end of the interview for you to ask any questions that you want, or for you to tell us anything that you feel like you haven't had the chance to during the application process. So the interview is made up of success profile questions. So questions around your skills, behaviours and experiences again. And all the different skills, behaviours and experiences that you'll be asked about will be detailed in the guide for applicants in advance. And then there'll also be a section on the law and policy. So this might be about the area of law that was in the written test. It might be about a different area of law. Either way, you'll be sent the relevant materials in advance if any preparation in advance is needed. And the legal and policy section is really testing again how you think and approach the law and policy. We're not trying to catch you out at all. We often do ask follow-up questions, and be prepared for that, because it's not always a signifier that you've missed something or that we're trying to catch you out. We don't want you to be thrown by the fact if we do ask a follow-up question. We really do want to get the best out of you. Sometimes we're just asking questions either to sort of follow up on something that you said, or maybe to test out a slightly different way of thinking and to see how you respond to a different point of view. I think the best tip that I can give for interviews is that people who really enjoy thinking about the legal problems in the law do the best, I think. It really doesn't matter if you don't know the area of law particularly well. I think what really comes through in really strong applicants is curiosity and being open to challenge and thinking about, two sides of a complex area, and engaging with some of the debates around the complexities of law rather than the knowledge of the actual law itself. So I think that's my tips for the interview, and I'm going to hand back to Miles.
Thank you very much, Rosie. We've had quite a few questions through, so bear with me as I try and get through as many of them as I can. As I said at the start of the presentation, we might not be able to get through all of them, and there'll be some questions which may be slightly too technical for us to be able to answer, but you will be able to, if you feel necessary, email recruitment@lawcommission.gov.uk with those questions. If we could maybe go on to the next slide just so we can have that email up as we go through this Q&A, that would be fantastic. Yes, just there for you. So we're going to start off just here with a question about what research assistants do once they've finished their contract. We've been asked, for example, do research assistants commonly move into other roles within the Commission or the wider civil service, progress into further research or policy positions, or transition into external opportunities? I will hand over to Georgina for that.
Amazing. Thanks, Smile. I mean, first of all of those opportunities are open to you after being a research assistant. You're not funneled into any of those particular routes. That's a decision that you can make. But in terms of what the common route is, I would say lots of research assistants go on to become either solicitors or barristers. So maybe they go on and undertake the qualifying training for each of the SQE or the bar course training. Again, Bella spoke briefly about the role of a legal assistant, but that's very project dependent and that's not often a long-term position. Some research assistants have gone on to other roles in the civil service, such as the Attorney General's office. Many also go on to do a stint as a judicial assistant in either the High Court or Court of Appeal. So there are some similar roles that you can go on to do in the courts, but also many go on to become solicitors and barristers. But it's really a decision for you. And I wouldn't say that coming to the Commission funnels you into particular career paths. Our learning and development days are quite useful to explore other opportunities. So you get 5 days a year to contribute towards learning and development, and that could involve shadowing Office of Parliamentary Counsel in Parliament, sometimes other schemes with departments across government. So there's real opportunity regardless of your interests.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Next question I'm going to throw over to Rosie. It is, are international students eligible to apply for this position? Rosie.
Yes, absolutely. International students are. We have a number of international students, people who completed their law or other undergraduate degree abroad. The academic criteria is the minimum academic criteria, and what we would ask if the country in which you got your degree doesn't follow the same pattern in terms of awarding first class or 2-1 degrees, then provide as much information as you can about what your scores were, and all we need to know is that it's an equivalent of the minimum academic criteria here. And again, as I think Georgina mentioned, it's really useful for us to, if you can show your commitment to the law of England and Wales and the area of law in particular that you're interested in, that the Law Commission is doing.
That's great, thanks. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, please put them through the Q&A function. Please don't use the raise hand function. I won't be able to answer your questions if you try and do that. Next question is again for Rosie. When applying, do we state which of the 4 areas, I'm assuming you mean 4 teams, we're interested in, or are we assigned to an area and then to a project as is needed? Rosie?
Certainly. So yes, for the 4 teams, each of the different teams is a separate application. So you can only apply to one team, and they're considered sort of separate recruitment. So you have to commit at the beginning to the team that you are applying to, and then that team will consider your application. In terms of the areas of law or projects within that team, there will be space on the application form and interview for you to explain what your particular interest is, if there is a project that you're particularly interested in or that you have relevant experience in. However, the decision about which project the successful research assistant will work on is dictated really by the business needs at the time that the research assistants start in September. So we can't guarantee work on any one particular project. But we do try and take into consideration people's interests and experience as well when we're making the decision about how to allocate the research assistants to projects.
Fantastic. And then another one for Rosie, and then I'll give you a little bit of a break. Given that some of the projects discussed may have concluded by September 2026, would it be wise to discuss them in applications, or is it better to stay quite general about the areas of interest?
It's a good question. I think that as long as your sort of awareness is up to date, and all of the updates on the projects will all be on our website. I think as long as your awareness is up to date, it's absolutely fine to talk about areas of interest or experience that you have, even if the project will have concluded by the time that you start. You know, we understand that a lot of people's motivation might come from bits of work that they've already seen as part of their work experience as part of their course or their study. So it's absolutely fine for you to talk about that. We're interested to know what you're interested in. But yeah, so as long as you check that you're not talking about a project as if it's going to be continuing when there's been an update that's sort of readily available that tells you that it's not going to be. So I think that's probably the only caveat I give, but feel free to talk about what's interesting to you.
Fantastic, thanks very much. I'll come over to Bella just now. Is this a remote position or based in your London office as previously mentioned? Bella, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Of course. RAs are required to be in a London office 2 days a week. But other than that, they can live elsewhere in the UK if they're able to access the office 2 days a week. I myself don't live in London, and that's manageable for me.
Indeed, thanks very much. There's quite a few questions here. I'm just trying to go through them just now. Let's see. We have one question here. What are the hours/days like per week? Is it yep, there we go. Anyone want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. So it's about a 37-hour week, which works out to about 7.5 hours a day. So the hours are really manageable. And I would say that the atmosphere within the commission is that you really do work those hours strictly. This isn't the case where you're burning the candle at both ends, working day and night. So it's a real nice work balance to have. And it means that you're able to get involved as well with other commitments. Like I said earlier, you've got social, the outreach, mental health allies, and overall, it's not possible, however, to balance alongside final or third year at university. So it is generally a full-time position, unless your application states otherwise. I do think there is room to express an option for part-time in your application, but generally it's a full-time role, 37 hours a week.
We have also had a question about part-time work. Rosie, I'll come over to you to flesh that out a bit more.
Yes, so is this just sort of about the possibility of part-time work?
Yeah, the availability of it for RAs.
Yeah. It is possible. So the Law Commission, like rest of the civil service, will consider requests for different working arrangements, flexible working, which can include part-time work. We have to ensure that the business need of the Law Commission is met. So if we have a need for example, 3 full-time research assistants, if someone requests to work part-time, we do need to consider how we can make up the rest of that time with other resources as well. So that's some of the considerations that we'll give. If you are interested and would like to do part-time work, please do state that clearly in your application form, and also to what extent it would be part-time. So we do consider things like 4 days a week. If it's much lower than that, then it can be difficult, as I say, for sort of the business needs, but we do consider all requests for it. Just do make that clear in your application form.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rosie. We have another question here is, could you describe the training and onboarding process for a new research assistant? I mean, happy for anyone to answer that. Might be good to have multiple perspectives on this. Anyone want to come in on that?
I can give the formal one, and then maybe someone else can give the more informal response to it. So the formal onboarding is that we expect all research assistants to start the same day in September, and we have a week of induction. And the induction covers sessions on a full range of the skills that we require research assistants to have. So on sort of the use of emails to drafting to all the different teams, the work that's ongoing, who everyone is in the commission, technical things that you'll need to know, library access, all that kind of thing. So it's a week of sessions. You'll be with your full cohort. And then there's other sort of training that goes on throughout the year. So we have mandatory training as civil servants. We offer particular training that's specific to the research assistant job or to the Law Commission that everyone in the whole commission will attend. It's sort of an ongoing process, I think, in sort of getting everyone skilled up to deliver the work as we go through. But that first week is sort of an intensive session where you'll be throwing an awful lot of information and get to meet everyone as well. And they're all recorded, so you can rewatch things later on. So sometimes you'll be inducted on something that you might not be doing for the first couple of weeks, and then when you come to it, you'll be able to ask people again or watch the recording again to remind you.
Fantastic. Great. I have a couple more questions. Next up is, in terms of our projects, is there a time frame that we are given to finish a law reform project? Anyone want to comment on that?
I'm happy to.
Go for
So at the beginning, the initiation stage that Bella mentioned is when we'll usually agree what we expect our time frame to be for a project. And I think on average, our projects are roughly about 2 years. So it's sort of about 9 months to get a consultation paper out, 3 months of public consultation, and then a year to analyse, finalise our policy and publish the final report. That does differ depending on the size of the project, the issues that we're looking at, and sort of who the stakeholders are as well. But that's sort of roughly the timing. So under the law, no, there's no specific requirement for how long projects take, but it's something that we agree with the department at the beginning. But we do keep it under review because some things change. Sometimes we're able to bring it forward and move a bit quicker, or to move some of the project a bit quicker. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer because we don't know all the issues right at the very start. So it's a bit of a sort of a moving process.
Fantastic. And another question here, how long does it take for government to adopt your recommendations? And are there any challenges that we face in this process? Rosie, you want to come in on that one again?
Sure. So for the government to adopt our recommendations, there's no sort of real time frame. It is always a matter for them to decide whether they're going to adopt them or not. In statute, there is a requirement that the government will respond to our recommendations. So it's 6 months for them to respond informally, and 12 months for them to respond formally. Now, that response might be, no, thank you, not interested. It might be yes, but not now. It might be yes, we'll do some of it, or it might be yes, we're going to do it all. So that's where the time frame, the sort of the formal time frame comes in. But in terms of adopting them or sort of implementing them, it can be a number of years afterwards. It could be immediately. We've had some implementation whilst the project is still ongoing. They said, we really like where you're going with this. We actually are going to do this right now because there's a vehicle in government that we can use. And other times it's not the right time once we publish, but sort of 5-6 years later, the issue comes up again, and they have a look back at what we recommended at the time, and they're like, well, now's the right time to do it. So there's no time limit on that. In terms of the challenges that we face, political interest, yes, that's sort of always an issue. As Bella mentioned, the government, when they ask us to take on a project, they always have to have a serious intention to do some reform in this area. That doesn't mean they're committed to doing the reform that we recommend, but it's usually in areas where there's general agreement that it's right that something needs to be done here. So being an independent body, being able to take our time and think through things and having a really evidence-based and robust way of coming up with recommendations, we are protected a little bit in that way, and our recommendations are protected from some of the political issues that prevent maybe other areas being able to progress policy, because we're able to sort of take a step back from what's sort of the immediate political need and think what makes the most sense for a fair and logical law.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rosie. Next question is, could you please advise on the age range of the candidates / research assistants, and whether more mature candidates are also considered? Georgina?
Thanks, Miles. Mature candidates are definitely also considered. So we have quite a broad range in terms of age range of research assistants. There's no requirement that you're fresh out of university. That might be the case for some candidates, but we've also had mature research assistants who might have come later on in life after a career change, after deciding that actually they want to start a career in law, and they've started to explore what that might look like. So definitely a wide range, and mature candidates are considered.
Brilliant. And how many projects would one research assistant typically be working on at any given time? Bella, I'll come over to you for that.
Thanks, Miles. Research assistants work on one project primarily at any given time. However, there are often opportunities to work across projects on specific occasions like minuting a meeting, attending an event, proofreading a publication, things like that. And there are also opportunities to continue isolated pieces of work on a project that might have finished that a research assistant was formerly working on.
Great. And then we've got a question about tips for preparing for interview, and in particular, if any research assistants would like to share any tips they had from their own experience of preparing for an interview. Rosie, I'll come to you first on just like general tips for preparing for interview, and then if any of the research assistants would like to share any sort of particular tricks they used, then I'll come back to them.
Yes, absolutely. And also just on the earlier question, I myself was a mature candidate when I applied and started as a research assistant. I think I was about 15 years post qualification. In terms of tips for interviews, I think definitely, so you will be told in advance a little bit more information about the legal and policy questions. And I think use some time to really think through what the issues are that area of law or sort of the material that you've been sent. What are the issues that it raises? How would you think about approaching the law, the problems that there might be, or the good bits of the law? I think just give yourself a little bit of time to sort of think creatively around that bit of law, because as I said, that's sort of where I think some of the most interesting discussions in interview can happen. And to sort of be prepared for challenging questions about that, I think would be my sort of top tip.
Fantastic. And any of the research assistants want to share any particular tips that they used?
I'm happy to jump in maybe on the competency side of things. So the guide for applicants that we've referenced at the presentation was really useful, I found, in trying to outline what the competencies were, what you were expected to do as a research assistant. And I found it really helpful to essentially draw mind maps of every experience I'd ever done that might map out against that competency, and just making sure that I had maybe 1 to 2 examples per each competency that I could talk through. So if they were asking questions about teamwork, communication, I had multiple examples that I could use and refer to. And I think the other thing that Rosie mentioned earlier for the application, the STAR technique, that also rings true for the interview. So try and practice and make sure that you can articulate that out loud and explain maybe why you did something and what the result was. So maintaining that structure in an interview as well as on paper.
Fantastic, thanks very much. And another question we've got is, do research assistants have sort of reflective time during the week? Rosie, I'll come on to you for that.
Yes, so we put a lot of sort of time and value, I think, in the line management relationship that research assistants have. And there is an expectation that you will have regular meetings with your line manager, and within those there'll be opportunities to sort of reflect in terms of your development, and that's both on the work that you're doing at the Law Commission, but also your career as well. And there's a lot of sort of time and resource that the Commission offer to help the research assistants develop within role and, as I say, sort of career-wise as well. So there are lots of opportunities sort of throughout your working week, the month. There's quarterly review processes where you can, with your line manager or with colleagues, if you like, reflect on sort of your own development and think about ways of, other experiences that you might want to get out of your time at the Law Commission, if that answers the question.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Rosie, a question for you just now. If we're not able to answer this, that's fine. I can always just direct to the recruitment inbox. Do the academic requirements of 2 years change for people who are undertaking the GDL? Or is there any sort of, how does that work, I guess?
Yes, certainly. So the 2-year requirement doesn't change. There are lots of different ways of meeting the 2-year requirement, and the GDL can form part of that. The guide for applicants will have a lot of detail about all the different qualifications and to what extent they meet or partly meet the 2-year qualification, but it's 2 years full-time legal study.
Fantastic. Great. We've had a whole bunch of questions, so very sorry we've not been able to come on and answer all of them. If you do have any particular questions about the recruitment process, as I say, the email's just there. Otherwise, as we've pointed out, the guide for applicants, once recruitment opens, will be available, and it will be able to answer the majority of your questions, I'm sure. We're now coming towards the end of the time that we've got here, so we're going to end the call just there. Thank you all very much for attending, and we hope to see you apply very soon. Good evening.